Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Brian's Horror Corner, and welcome to this horror movie review for day 15 of my 31 Days of Halloween Horror series. Yes, I know I'm a couple days behind, but we will get 31 separate movie reviews in here. Hopefully, I'll get caught up and get ahead of the game before the end of the month here, but life doesn't take a break. So, anyway, if you're familiar with my channel, you know that we're going to jump back into the realm of zombie horror movies today. On my channel over the last year and a half, I have the first two George Romero zombie movies, Night of the Living Dead, which I believe I did in May of 2021, and then Dawn of the Dead I did last October as part of my 31 series there. We're going to take a look at the third leg of the trilogy. Well, I guess it's not really a trilogy anymore because he did three more after that. But we are going to go ahead and take a look at Day of the Dead, the third George A. Romero zombie movie, Day of the Dead from 1985. So this is a movie. It was a first time watch for me, just as those previous two were at the time that I reviewed them. And I have the nice Scream Factory Collector's Edition here with a Google of special features there, which I have yet to watch, but did watch the movie for the first time. So yeah, let's just go ahead and get into my thoughts on Day of the Dead. So starting off with the premise, Day of the Dead's a 1985 American post-apocalyptic zombie horror film written and directed by George A. Romero and produced by Richard P. Rubenstein. It's the third film in the Romero Night of the Living Dead series. So basically, the movie is members of a group of survivors of a zombie apocalypse are sheltering in an underground bunker in Florida where they must determine the outcome of humanity's conflict with the undead horde. Romero described the film as a tragedy about how lack of human communication causes chaos and collapse, even in this small little pie slice of society. So basically, the film opens where there's a zombie apocalypse has ravaged the entire world, with undead zombies affected with a mysterious contagious disease outnumbering humans 400,000 to 1. A handful of surviving humans live within a secure underground bunker in an underground facility in the Everglades, housing scientists and soldiers. The scientists are trying to find a solution to the zombie pandemic. The soldiers have been assigned to protect them. Dr. Sarah Bauman, her lover, soldier Private Miguel Salazar, radio operator Bill McDermott, and helicopter pilot John fly from their underground base to Fort Myers, Florida, in an attempt to locate additional survivors. They find only a large horde of the undead, and they return to the base where they are told that the military detachment's officer in charge, Major Cooper, has died. Sarah becomes concerned over Miguel's worsening mental state. Dr. Logan, the lead scientist, nicknamed Frankenstein by the soldiers because of his grisly surgical dissections of the zombies, believes that the undead plague victims can be made docile and domesticated through training and conditioning. He keeps a collection of captive undead guinea pigs for use as test subjects in a large underground corral in the compound. Sarah vehemently opposes Dr. Logan's conditioning research. Instead, she wants to search for a possible cure for the virus. Sarah discovers that Dr. Logan has been experimenting on the corpses of dead soldiers and feeding them to the Sarah discovers that Dr. Logan has been experimenting on the corpses of dead soldiers, period. So that's kind of the setup and the premise. As far as the cast goes, we have Laurie Cardile as Dr. Sarah Bowman, Joseph Pilato as Captain Henry Rhodes, Terry Alexander as John Flyboy, Jariah Conroy as Bill, Mc, Bill McDermott, Richard Liberty as Dr. Frankenstein Logan, Anthony DeLeo Jr. as Private Miguel Salazar, Sherman Howard as Bub, Gary Howard Clark as Private Walter Steele, Ralph Morerio as Private Robert Rickles, and John Amplas as Dr. Ted Fisher, technician. I probably butchered some of those names. I'm sure I did. So that's the setup, the premise, and the cast for Dawn of the Dead from 1985. For the most part, I enjoyed this movie. It isn't quite as strong to me as either Night of the Living Dead or Dawn of the Dead, the originals, not the remakes of those movies. But it is still good. It is still a worthy Romero zombie film. So let's just get into the things first that I like about it with my pros. So obviously, with this movie, you got to start with the practical effects. This was at the height of 80s practical horror effects, just second to none. And in this movie, especially the gore effects are just absolutely superb. They're really cool and fun. And of course, realistically gory and even gross with the ripping of the flesh or the ripping of the bodies, as the zombies do towards the end of the movie, especially. Just fantastic stuff. Um, yeah, you got Tom Savini here doing the special effects, the practical effects, and it's fantastic. I really can't. That's when I think of this movie, that's the number one thing that comes to mind is those. I just pictured a certain character having his body ripped apart, and another character getting the flesh ripped off his head and having the eyeball pop out. I just that image is in my head when I think of this movie, and yeah, definitely some of the best gory effects, practical effects of any 80s horror movie. So that's the number one thing. Also, the themes in the movie, from a social commentary standpoint, Romero uses in this movie are really interesting. Of course, he uses them as well in Dawn of the Dead and Night of the Living Dead. In this movie, it's all about the breakdown of humanity, the lack of communication between the survivors that are left, um, the power of the military, and whether that power will be exploited and abused. It makes the viewer ask a lot of questions but it does it in a way that doesn't hit you over the head over and over and over again, like you get with a lot of sort of social commentary horror movies nowadays. Romero does it in a very subtle but yet effective way, I feel like. It ends up being very effective having these themes because in this movie, I mean, clearly he has the scientists as sort of the quote unquote good guys, and the military that protects them is quote unquote the bad guys, even more so than the zombies in some ways, given how they sort of experiment with the zombies and um, kind of get them back into society any way that they can. The scientists do. So clearly, he has the military as sort of the abusive group or the sort of the bad guys, as I said in this movie. So, but yeah, very effective with his themes here. I like the setting of the underground bunker. It feels very claustrophobic and effective. Of course, in the first movie, it was the old house and Night of the Living Dead, and the Dawn of the Dead. Of course, it was the shopping mall, the large shopping center that was our setting. And in this movie, it is the underground bunker, which does sort of add to that claustrophobic feel as I was talking about. Where all the undead are above ground and the survivors are left hiding underground. There's kind of an interesting dichotomy with that, where the zombies are sort of running the earth above ground and the humans, for better, the good and the bad, are underground trying to hide from them until they can figure out a way to either coexist with them or to try to bring them back to be in more of a human state. So I thought that whole thing was interesting. But yeah, I enjoyed the setting. That was something that I thought was effective in this movie. Also, I like the idea, the whole premise, and none of the other movies had this, the idea of possibly training the zombies through experiments by this character of Dr. Frankenstein, who I actually think is probably the most interesting character in this. And we'll get into that as I get into my cons. The only interesting character. Um, but yeah, just that whole premise of the idea that he's using these experiments to try to see if there's any humanity left in these zombies. I think that's a very unique idea, and of course we have our sort of our zombie guinea pig as Bob, of course played by Sherman Howard, who I think is he's an interesting zombie character in this movie. But I just thought that whole thing was interesting. It definitely adds another layer to Romero's zombie movies up to this point that we really didn't get in the first two movies. In the first two movies, it's basically the zombies are on the run and we have to try to run from them and survive from them. In this movie, there's kind of there's a stoppage, kind of like, well, can we maybe see if we can bring them back or find a cure for them or coexist with them? So I thought that was good. This movie has a really effective score. It's a really great 80s synthesizer kind of score, which I really like. I think it works really well for this particular zombie movie because it's the mid 80s. It's a score that seems very simple and you don't think too much about it, but actually, if you listen to it, it's actually a very layered and kind of an uneasy score by listening to it. There's some depth there, and yeah, I really enjoyed the score to I think it's my favorite score of the first three Romero zombie movies for sure. The fact that it's in the 80s as well and it is an 80s score doesn't hurt either because obviously that's my favorite decade of horror. And then my final pro for this movie, I think the look of the zombies is a bit better in this movie. Obviously, technology and what they could do with it compared to 68 and 78 when the first two movies were made. One of my big problems with Dawn of the Dead from 78 is they basically just had blue paint, blue makeup over the zombies, and I didn't think it was as effective as it could be. In this movie, there's still some blue zombie faces, but it's better with the blood and the gore involved, and just overall the look of the zombies is better in this movie. So yeah, I do like the look of the zombies better, at least in the previous movie. In the first movie, it was black and white, so they could do some things there where color really wasn't as much of an issue. But anyway, those are my pros. Getting on to some cons. The good old dream sequences. If you follow my channel, you know I'm not a big fan of when movies, whether it be horror or otherwise, when they pull the whole dream sequences on the viewer. And they do it twice in this movie. They do it at the beginning and they do it at the end, both through the same character, Dr. Sarah Bauman. Just not a fan of it. It's cheap and it adds nothing. It adds nothing to this movie. It's unnecessary, and it's just cheap and lazy. I don't know if studios are making them do it or I don't know who thinks those are a good idea. But yeah, the dream sequences. This movie loses a point just for that alone, and that might be more of a personal thing. But I think there's other people out there that are feel the same way from what I've heard. Another thing is there's a lot of scenes in this movie with characters just kind of talking and not just talking but shouting at each other, which on one hand you can kind of understand given the situation that they're in, where the breakdown of society and the fact that they have to remain hidden underground. People start to lose their minds, but it's like there's so much yelling in this movie by all the characters. We don't get a lot of zombies or a lot of action going on for the first hour, so I think maybe 5 to 10 minutes, if that, until the end, of course, when then shit goes sideways pretty good then. But yeah, prior to that, there's a lot of dialogue scenes, a lot of talking and shouting scenes between these human characters underground. It's definitely a slow burn zombie movie because of that. So yeah, just be warned about that as opposed to Dawn of the Dead and even Night of the Living Dead to a certain extent, where you got some pretty good action and you got some zombies throughout the movies. In this movie, they kind of save it for the end, and it's good when we get there, but it does take a bit to get there. A lot of the characters in this movie, I have to say, are over the top with their shouting, their laughing, just sort of their bombastic B movie cheesy um way about him. I mean, that you didn't really have in the first two movies. That's the one thing I have to say. Other than Dr. Frankenstein, Dr. Logan, as I mentioned in my pros, none of the characters, either clearly not the bad guys who are the military guys. You can't wait for them to die, and they do get their comeuppance. You do get some closure um, with that at the end of the movie, but because they're really asking for it. But even the good guys. I mean, Dr. Sarah Bauman, she's okay, but not a. They just don't have any characters in this movie other than maybe Doctor Frankenstein, and I say maybe that you can really grab onto, that are incredibly likable and that you follow through the movie. Um, it's harder to at the same, and it also has that B movie, cheesy B movie feel to it that the other movies didn't before. That kind of makes it harder to take the movie completely seriously. Um, so yeah, that's kind of a con as well. But as I said, none of the characters are really incredibly likable or that you latch on to. That doesn't help the movie very much. Where the previous two movies did have that. Um, like I said, not even the good guys. You would expect a couple of good guys to be that. And I just wasn't really. I wasn't finding it in this movie like I did in Romero's first two zombie movies. And then my final con. It's not really a scary zombie movie. There's no tension or dark dread in this movie. It's more of one of those fun and entertaining 80s movies. that I think could have used some more tension, some more horror, some more scares. Um, Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead both had their moments. Dawn of the Dead probably less. I think Night of the Living Dead is the most effective in terms of horror, in terms of tension, and part of that was because at the time that it was made and it's in black and white, so that makes it more effective. You don't have the practical effects or the gore effects that you would get through Dawn of the Dead and then more in Day of the Dead, where I think it kind of went from more of a horror to more of an entertaining, fun watch. I don't particularly, personally, I don't find zombies to be that horrific to begin with, especially the slower ones. It's a little different when you get into some of the later zombie movies, like the 28 days and 28-week movies where they're actually fast. That's kind of freaky. But as far as your traditional zombie movies, I'm just not somebody that's just not really my scary wheelhouse, if you will. But it's even less so in this movie. So that's another thing to keep in mind, that it's more of an entertaining, and it is an entertaining and fun '80s movie with the gore effects. And I do feel like it could have used some more of the at least the tension filled scenes, a little bit of scares, which we really don't get here. So overall, this is a mixed bag. I do enjoy it more than I don't. Romero does direct it really well again and again. The practical gore effects are going to be what take it up here. But I'm going to give this movie a 7 out of 10. Some people might think that's kind of harsh. Um, I do enjoy the movie. I'm glad I have the collector's edition through Screen Factory with it. I'm looking forward to watching those special features, but it does have some issues for me as far as being a horror zombie movie, especially comparing it to the first two, which I know you hate to compare, but you can't help it. This is the third one I've seen. So a 7 out of 10 for Day of the Dead from 1985. Go ahead and comment down below what you guys think of this movie. Am I being too hard on it? Do you enjoy it more than I do? Comment down below. Be sure to like this video and hit the little notification bell down below so you don't miss any of my upcoming reviews for this series. And please be sure to subscribe to my channel so you don't miss any of my great horror content, not just the rest of this series, but this year and beyond. So thank you for watching this review. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you're doing well, but stay scared. Bye.